In the world of tricking, nobody seems to be able to agree. What is a flip? What is considered one flip versus two flips? When someone is performing an off-axis flip, which is most of the time, where do we draw the line? In this video, we're going to look at tricking as well as other movement sports to try to understand what is a flip and how we might have been going about it all wrong from the start. Before we do anything, we'll start with a quiz. Is this a flip? If you said yes, that's good. We agree. But what about these? If you said yes to all these, do you know why? And if you said no, this video might change your mind.
If you answered no, do you think that these two tricks look the same? Well, after doing them, I can tell you they definitely don't feel the same. The second one was a lot easier.
In tricking, many people define a flip as the amount of inversions someone has in a skill. They may say something like, if their head went below their hips, or something like that, to imply that they were upside down. But what separated those two skills that I just did was not the amount of inversion. It was the ability to maintain the flipping axis. Whether or not that axis is inverted is not relevant.
When something is flipping, its orientation oscillates on the axis it's flipping on, meaning it goes one direction and then comes back to its original state. But without getting into too much physics, our bodies are not made like cones. We can make our bodies into different shapes, and therefore we can flip on different axes. And really, that's what separates flipping from twisting. When we backflip, we can only land after about 360 degrees of rotation. But when we twist, we can twist any amount and still be able to land on our feet.
And in my opinion, nobody in the movement sports world understands this better than skiers.
For someone who's used to tricking terminology, skiing names might sound like a bunch of incoherent jargon. But the only thing that's important to understand is that skiers count the total number of rotations and they deliberate between which one of those rotations is a twist and which is a flip.
Just a note here, skiers often define a flip as the person performing the flip dipping or oscillating on the axis of the flip, like we talked about before. Therefore, you can't just dip your head to the level of inversion on the axis. Your head has to come back up.
In a dub 10, or double 1080, there's 3 rotations. 2 of them is a flip. There's a lot of overlap in skiing terminology names and tricking names, probably due to the beginning of tricking happening close to the creation of freeskiing names in the 90s. So now we end up with a cork meaning one thing in tricking, and a cork meaning a similar but different thing in skiing, as well as the word flat spin. But we don't really have to worry about any of that. What's cool to understand is that tricks are different based on how many times you flip and how many times you spin, even if the total amount of rotations is the same. Skiers have found some pretty mind-melting tricks, pushing the boundaries of how many rotations can be done with different amounts of flips. So what does all of this mean? Really, all that I'm claiming is that we have a fundamental difference between a flip and a twist, aside from simply the level of inversion. And what we're seeing here is that the definition of a flip and the definition of an inversion may not be the same. You might be able to invert, but not flip, and flip without inverting. Let's take a B-kick as an example. A B-kick is a skill that rotates on the flat spin axis. It looks like this. Now, I would argue that skill is not just defined by the level of inversion that it has, because I can do something like this. That looks pretty ridiculous, and I don't think anybody would argue that that was a flip. But you can argue that it was the same amount of inversion as a B-kick and therefore was an invert. Before this video ends, I want to take a moment to go into some classic examples from tricking and see how understanding this definition of a flip might help us out. So tack trip and cheat 16 are 2 tricks that are often differentiated based on their inversion. If we look at this tack trip from Kaiga, you can see that his head goes below his hips, meaning that he inverted. But then his head, in a circular pattern, goes below his hips and comes back up before he really finishes the skill. Sure, he lands a little bit low, but you can see that he dipped and was on his way back up, meaning that he's
rotating around this flipping axis. If you look at a cheat 16 that he did, you can see that his head still dips below his hips or level with his hips in the skill. His head doesn't come back up. Its lowest point is at the end of the trick when he's already landed on the ground. All this means is that he hasn't initiated any kind of flipping axis. Rather, he's twisting, and because he's twisting so many times in cheat 16, he's just tilting. Maybe you could consider this an execution error, but because of the nature of the skill, the way that he's twisting and spotting his kick, he's not initiating any flip the same way that he's doing in attack trip. We can look at attack full in from Zen as well. First of all, wow. If you look at the axis his tack full is on, he maintains that axis in the second flip, and his head dips and comes back up before landing.
In this video, I've been saying the head dipping and going down and up, but really what I'm trying to say is that the head is completing a circle. So obviously the more horizontal the flip is, the more horizontal the circle is. When you do a straight back flip, your head goes straight down and straight up. And when you do a B kick, your head goes in a completely horizontal circle. I think this tack full in is something that's on the line of whether or not it is a completed double flip. But you can just look at the slanted circle that his head makes in attack full and then repeating that circle in the second flip.
I don't think it's really fair to say that this trick does not count because his second flip wasn't inverted when the tack full was on the same axis. Maybe this isn't a tack full in back out, but it is a double flipping tack full in, and that's pretty cool. And then there's other examples where we can apply this theory and understand why some double flips might not count, where the tricker does something with their body to pull themselves out of the flipping axis and sort of bail out early, landing on their feet before they should have. Because if you remember earlier, when we were talking about less inverted flipping axes, there's still only one point where you can land on your feet, and it's when you finish the flip. Now I want to hear what you think. Whether you've been tricking for 10 years, or you've never flipped, or you're a skier, or you're a parkour athlete, does anything I'm saying make sense? Do you think all of it's wrong? Does this video need a part 2? Let me know what you think in the comments. I really want to hear if you guys agree with this or you think I'm totally crazy. And thank you so much for watching. See you at Vertigo 7.